Yeah, I mean, we spoke about this before when Polite wasn't here, but I think it's important for, again, I want to say that people say that I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. Jewish is a tricky word, right? Because Judaism is a religion, right? But then when it comes to Eastern European Jews and even Sephardic Jews, it's also a gene pool and a lineage. And there's also like cultural Judaism, like bagels and lox and, a New York accent and shit like that, right? So I'll say I'm Jewish, but like I said, I don't really practice Judaism. I'm not particularly pro-Israel. I think there are things that Israel has provided for Jewish people who needed a home, but then the reality of it is that it's backed, the way that Israel has been backed by the United States. There's a lot of really fucked up shit that goes on basically on behalf of the European Jewish people. You know what I mean? The reason that when you say why is the Holocaust more important than transatlantic slave trade, what you mean, I believe, is why is it treated as such? You know what I'm saying? Yes. Right. And so I think it's important for people to hear somebody who you might look at as Jewish and call Jewish explain that, because to me, it's because of money and resources, and it's because the Western world wants a foothold in the Middle East. And to me, the Holocaust was a reason to establish a foothold in the Middle East, right? And what we were talking about before is that the U.S. didn't think the Holocaust was wrong. We absorbed all of the Nazi scientists. We absorbed Nazis and gave them a new life as highly paid scientists to work for NASA. You understand? All right. Pause for the cause. Got it? Yeah, it's good. That's good.
Yeah, he expects you to keep talking.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He's a wild dude, man. You're a wild dude, yeah. Like this is what I'm saying, right?
I've been doing this shit for years.
I can't, bro. I can't.
My mind
just having to just power through. Listen, let me put it. Let me put it this way. The narrative.
I still gotta keep a straight face.
Yo, the narrative, right? The narrative is that Israel was established as some type of altruistic homeland for the Jewish people. The way that it's impossible for me to believe that is when you look at the fact that the United States, who is the same entity that supported and facilitated that establishment, absorbed Nazi scientists and other Nazis and created a new life for them in the United States. So this was not a moral decision. You cannot, no matter how positive it might have been for some Jewish people, you cannot look at this as a decision that's based in morality. Because when you look at the totality of the actions around the Holocaust, they're benefiting from the Holocaust. Like, they absorbed Nazi scientists, bro, gave them new identities, gave them high-paying jobs as NASA scientists. You think that if you really were morally opposed to the activities of these individuals, that you would establish Israel and do that? So I know that this is not a moral decision, right? So then you have to look at the foothold that the U.S. has in oil and in war. War is one of the most profitable things in the world, right? You have companies like Halliburton that make bullets, they make munitions, they make rations, all of these things, right? War is the most profitable business in the game. War, prison, oil, right? Having a foothold in the Middle East does that, right? And AIPAC, which is an organization that is connected to the Israeli government, which is a right-wing government, this is a corrupt government that's connected to our corrupt government, right? And it's all about money. Politics and morality is guided by money. So that's why there's a lot of money in it. It's money, man. It comes down to money. You know what I'm saying? And one of the, a lot of times I've seen people compare the Holocaust to the transatlantic slave trade. And I said this before, but I'll say it again since we all together. The major difference, right? And I don't want to downplay, any of it, right? And I know that I have family members that are Israeli, and I have family members that take a lot of pride in Israel, you know what I mean? And I think that just like we were saying before, what Vlad is doing, Vlad is problematic, but he has also elevated a lot of voices that are productive voices. So not everything is one way or the other, right? Israel isn't one way or another. There's a lot of positive things in individuals' lives that have come of it, but there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood on those hands, right? So I'm not minimizing anything. The difference between the Holocaust as an atrocity that happened in the lineage of the Jewish people and the transatlantic slave trade is that the transatlantic slave trade is a complete interruption of the entire evolutionary history of humanity and culture. It's an interruption of the family structure. It's an interruption of the spiritual religious structure. It's an interruption of parenting. People were not allowed to be fathers, not allowed to be husbands for hundreds of years. You know what I'm saying? So the Holocaust is a disgusting, horrible atrocity, but generations were able to pass down what parenting it means to the Jewish culture, what honor means to Jewish culture, what hard work and success means to the Jewish culture was not lost in those years. That was systematically an attempt to eradicate that in the transatlantic slave trade. We spent tens of thousands of years as human beings learning how to exist as human beings, and then you took a group of human beings and prevented them from continuing to act on that knowledge that they had amassed. It is a complete interruption of an entire adaptive history and a relocation to a place that people are maladapted to exist in. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a very different thing. And I think we got to stop comparing them, because I think like that's another okie doke to pit Jewish people against black people, or to like use Jews as an example of success and to try to like downplay black people for not being able to succeed as if there's a correlative path, but it's not a correlative path. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing. And we don't need to be against each other and compare our atrocities. Is different. It doesn't mean a Holocaust isn't fucking horrible just because the transatlantic slave trade is the worst crime in human history. Like, that's just a fact. It doesn't, you know, I said this on my live the other day about white Jesus, and then I'll pass it back to you, is like, it's okay for you to have a personal relationship with white Jesus as an image. If that's an image of love and positivity for you, that's okay. But white Jesus as a symbol has been used as a tool of subjugation and oppression overwhelmingly throughout the globe. And just because you have a personal relationship of love and affinity for it doesn't give you the right to pretend that the truth of the way white Jesus as an image has been used exists. The same way that it's okay for the Holocaust to be horrible and it's okay for the transatlantic slave trade to be worse. That doesn't discredit Jewish suffering just because the transatlantic slave trade was worse, yo. It ain't a competition. You know what I'm saying?
Word. Yeah, so I totally agree. And to add on, I don't feel there should be any comparison. Not in the sense that, there's no comparison to undermine someone's suffrage, but I feel there should be no comparisons amongst human suffrage, because they're all atrocities that took place. Of course, I have more of an affinity to the history that connects more with my genealogy, my lineage. And I don't conceive anything to be a greater atrocity to happen on planet Earth than that of the transatlantic slave trade that comes on the cusp of the trans-Sub-Saharan slave trade, which was actually longer, where the white man got his business model from, but more improved from the Arab. Okay, so that was over 1,000 years. The trans-Sub-Saharan slave trade that evolved into the transatlantic slave trade, which took less than half the time or so. So, that's almost 2,000 fucking years of a people, being disenfranchised, colonized, it's one of the worst things that ever happened on planet Earth. It is the worst thing that's ever happened on planet Earth. So, but at the same rate, it being the worst thing, if it is a proven fact that another people have suffered, let those people have the right to identify with their history, the best parts and the worst parts. I don't have a dog in that fight. Right. You know what I'm saying? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in humanity coming to terms. Yeah. And I'm interested in some of the transgenerational behaviors that have evolved out of our suffrage. I'm interested in dissolving those things and recouping and recovering, and for the rest of humanity to understand that a 60, 70 year turnaround after a 400 plus, near 2,000 stint, depending on how far back in history you want to go, is too much to ask for. It's too much to ask people 60, 70 years, why black people act like this? How come y'all don't have that?
Iron Solomon, are you aware, my brother? Because, just like we have been taught about history, fabricated history, are you aware that there were also Jews who financed the slave trade? Are you aware of any of that history?
I'm not intimately. I'm aware of it, but in a fairly superficial way. You know what I mean? Yeah. But again, like I know, even if that was in my personal lineage, I don't. I may benefit from that, and I've inherited that, right? You know what I'm saying? And so I think part of the problem comes with that's an act of evil without a doubt, right? But to spread that act of evil to all of any person who could be considered Jewish is where I personally take issue or think that it's flawed. You know what I'm saying? Because of course that's horrible. You know what I mean? And I don't even think Jews looked like me at that time, right? Original Jews obviously did not look like me. Jesus was a Jew, did not look like me, right? That's not to separate myself from it at all. I'm aware of it. You know what I mean? I don't really know what conclusion to draw from it, except that people are fucking evil and power is corrupting, and there's a lot of human history with disgusting abuses of other human beings. And I personally, as a person who is Jewish by certain definitions, am totally against that. You know what I mean?
Y'all have these discussions amongst yourselves? Like when y'all amongst yourself about African people?
I have not had a conversation with my family who's my blood relatives who are Jewish about Jews having a role in the slave trade. We have not had a conversation about that. No.
Well, not only Jews,
Yeah.
it was everybody. It was Africans too. So that's what I want you.
Oh, I mean, please believe, I think you could tell that I've spoken about and thought about and learned about this stuff to a large extent, and as I was saying before, I've fucked up holidays with some of the things that I have to say, because not everybody wants to hear it. I think again, that's where orthodoxy becomes problematic, right? Because people conflate Israel and Judaism, and they're not the same thing. Israel is a government. Israel is a nation, right? And there's corruption and there's abuses of power that go on there. But like I was saying before, there are people who practicing Jews that live in Israel that are at the protests against the actions of the Israeli government. So I actually, the same way that I think that the Republican Party, our government in general, Donald Trump has co-opted poor white people to vote against their interests and do their biddings, that I think that the corruption in the Israeli government has co-opted Jewish people and co-opted Judaism and co-opted the allegiance of people who self-identify as Jewish as having to be conjoined with being pro-Israel. Because I don't think being anti-Donald Trump means I'm anti-American. Do you think it is? I think being pro Brother Polite and pro Sonetta should be pro-American. To me, I think being anti-Donald Trump, in theory, from what they tell us about dissent and how America is supposed to value dissent, is supposed to be one of the most patriotic things I can do, is to be anti-Donald Trump, right? So to be anti-Israel can be the most Jewish thing that you do. That's a government entity. It's not a religion or a system of beliefs. You know what I'm saying?